In the very early years of Ananda, when we were living at Ananda Village, and that was basically all that Ananda was, we didn't even have to say Ananda Village then. You just said Ananda, because there was only one Ananda, and that was that. I don't really remember when we started celebrating Swamiji's birthdays in the way that we did for a number of years, but it was the first year or two that I was there. And we started putting on these big outdoor events. The weather was always a little dicey, but it seemed to come out clear on May 19th. And in fact, there was even a place that wasn't on Ananda land, but it was down the hill from the meditation retreat, and we began to call it the Birthday Meadow, because every year on Swamiji's birthday, we would just sort of move out into that area, and we'd put up canopies, and we'd put up tables, and we'd bring refreshments, and we'd bring all of us. There's a photograph, it may have been shown through the cycle tonight, where Swamiji's sitting in a chair, and there's a lot of small children around him. He's wearing a garland, and it was with his long hair and his orange robes, and that was taken in the Birthday Meadow in one of those very early events. And one of the things I was in charge of cooking at that time, so I was always in the middle of those because I was making food and helping to just the logistics of the thing. And we'd go down in the morning and we'd create a whole world there, just on land that actually wasn't even ours. It was just government land that we would use. We'd create this whole world, we'd bring everyone in, we'd have this huge celebration, then we'd take the whole thing down and it would go away. And after a while, at least for me, it became somewhat symbolic of the whole learning experience of what Ananda was. Because I had arrived there as a perfectly ordinary American girl. I had never, by the time I arrived in the community in 1971, actually my 49th anniversary is June 1st, so it's coming really soon. That was the day that I arrived. When Swamiji heard we were coming, he told us to arrive on a Tuesday before noon, because that was the most auspicious time to get there. So it was a Tuesday, June 1st, 1971. But I was just a perfectly ordinary American girl. I knew a lot about, not a lot, I knew something about self-realization. I was steeped in the teachings of Ramakrishna, and I'd read a lot about saints by that point of time. But my whole being was just this ordinary Western world that we lived in. And Swamiji's intention with us had so many different levels, what he was working with. He was on fire with this mission from his guru. He wrote in the Path later on how Master at the garden party declared the importance of these communities. I'm planting my words in the ether, I'm sowing my thoughts in the ether, and they shall move the West. And it was that these communities would start. And Swami Kriyananda, especially once he was separated from SRF and had to find a pathway on his own, felt that it was his duty to start these communities. So we were out there just in this very remote location with very little money and just making it up as we went along. And Swami was working with us on levels that I couldn't perceive. I could feel something happening, but I really didn't know what it was, and only much, much later could I look back and see it. Swami was like this radiating magnetic force, and he was in his 40s at that time, and very, very strong physically, and very strong in his personality and his presentation and the way he would teach and the way he would talk. Whenever he would give a talk, he would talk powerfully and quickly and just pouring these ideas out, to this little group of people, often outdoors. We'd be sitting in what we called the temple of trees on these mats that we had there, just 50 people, 30 people. Swami would act. The energy Swami was putting out, he could have been in a stadium of 20,000 people. It was like he was campaigning from the east to the west to bring Master's teachings and the thoughts that were sowed in the ether. And he just was having to persuade this whole culture to turn itself in another direction. Even those of us who were there with him, who had walked away from, we really didn't have anything. Almost all of us were young. Many of us were college dropouts. Only a few were married. There were just 1 or 2 children. It was a very, well, I'm speaking of the portion of the community at the retreat. There were more children down at what we called the farm at that point, but the core group. But we were still totally imbued with where we had come from. And Swami was having to pull us like this into a new reality. But he couldn't push us into it. He had to attract it out of us. And so that's why I was saying he was this field of magnetism that our energies were being drawn into it. When I think of those years for myself, those first 6 or 7, 10 years, I think of myself as being in 2 pieces. And one piece of me was my mind. And my mind is big, my mind is forceful, and my mind is really, really busy. And in those years, and my mind in those years was really, really confused. And it was just going, it just was going in all directions all the time. And I remember just every idea that I had, I would present to Swami, and he would tell me which ones were valid and which ones were really dumb. And we sort of, just over the course of time, we just sort of gradually worked through it. And I was always spinning with emotions and God knows what. That was part of me. The other part of me was absolutely rock solid. Just absolutely rock solid. And I would call that my heart. My heart in the sense, not my emotional heart, but the feeling that was in my spirit. I knew exactly where I was, I knew exactly what I was doing, and there was no power on earth that was going to take me away from it. And it was like all of us, and I say us looking back in time, and I say all of us who are here now, that's who we are at all times. There's a part of us that is just moving in delusion, and the little thought brain, I want this, I don't want that, I don't know what's going to happen at the end of this period. Is there going to be an economy? Will I have anything that I still really want? Will my relationship stand up to this quarantine? Will my children be okay? It just goes on and on and on and on like that. But there's another part of it, and that's our soul nature. And our soul nature knows why we were born. Our soul nature knows exactly why we're here at this moment. It's perfectly content with everything that's happening, because it knows that I came here for one purpose, and that was to draw closer to God. And everything that's happening, my soul nature perceives it as this beautiful package of light that Divine Mother is giving to me. Oh, look, this wonderful present. I'm going to lose everything I think I want, you know, like this. I'm going to get to be somebody completely else. Somebody much more wonderful. And the thoughts spin like this, and the soul just marches on, marches on. And sometimes, if we're lucky, the mind cooperates with it, and we all move in harmony. And if we're not lucky, the mind freaks out, and the soul just, it's like a drop of water being drawn to the sea. So we were there with Swami in those early years, and he was the ocean. I mean, using that image, it's a very powerful one. He was the ocean. He was the ocean of spirit that was coming through him, that was Master through him, and Master working through him because of Swami's absolute commitment to be that channel. It wasn't like, there was no surprise about why he had that power. He had that power because every single day he recommitted himself to that as the reason why he was living. He was a disciple of a great Master, and in his heart and in person with Master, he had promised him. Master said, "You have a great work to do. Every man has disappointed me. But you mustn't disappoint me, except, he said, everyone except Rajasi has disappointed me. But Swami thought, Master had many great men as his disciples. What could Master be speaking about? And Swami began to understand it was this work that had to be done. Because of the power of Master's life, Swami used to describe Master as a meteor streaking across the sky. Just this power just moving through the universe. It's so hard for us to fully cognize it's not hard for us to fully cognize at all, sort of how this universe is really run. This is an energy universe based on consciousness. And what really moves this entire creation, not just our little town or our little feelings or anything, this entire creation is these movements of consciousness. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Master writes, Jesus and Babaji together have planned the salvation of this age. They're greatly concerned about the materialism and the bigotry and the growing violence. And well, I don't have to make the list. It's just, there it is. Look out the window. And Jesus and Babaji up in the Himalayas, this deathless yogi, Jesus, this great master, the way Master puts it in Autobiography of a Yogi, one with a body, which is Babaji, eternally in that physical body, one without a body, Jesus. And the two masters are working it out for us, for this planet. So when things happen in this world, we think that president or that prime minister or that cohort of bankers or this manufacturer is really doing things. But Master tells us Jesus and Babaji are working out the salvation of this planet, working out the direction of this world, moving us from Kali Yuga into Dwapara Yuga. And every one of us who is born into this period of time, born into any period of time, we always have the same choice, but this is where we are standing. What am I going to do with my life? What is the value of my life? What are my values? Who do I want to serve? What cause do I want to give my life to? I was an ordinary American girl in certain ways, but I was not ordinary in other ways, in that I had this absolutely overwhelming desire to give my life to a cause I could believe in. It just seemed to live just sort of halfway, just sort of a little energy with family, a little energy with work, a little energy with this, a little energy with that. I thought I would blow apart. Anguishing monotony. That's the word that Master gives it in Autobiography of a Yogi. I hadn't read that word. I didn't find that word until later, but I lived those words. Just the anguishing monotony of it was enough almost literally to cause me to lose my mental balance. And then Swamiji just walked into this room where I was sitting. It was a public lecture, and he walked into it. By then I knew that there was something about God and meditation and self-realization. I had all this philosophy. That was part of what was going along in my head. All this philosophy, but I couldn't figure out what to do with it. And then Swami walked into this room. I can't even begin to do it. Let me try to do it better. Swami walked into this room, and I had never seen anything like it. I mean, I say it. There was a he. But I had never seen anything like it. I had never seen anything like that walk into a room. Because it was that pulsing force of magnetism of an instrument of a great master who was working for the transformation of the world. And all I thought was, whatever it is he has, that's what I'm looking for. He didn't even speak. He hadn't yet spoken. He did speak. He hadn't yet spoken, but it was what I wanted. You see, and then I learned what it was. First of all, above all, bliss. Not anguishing monotony, but ever new joy. And the opportunity to give that joy to others. Of course, first one has to acquire it for oneself, or at least a little bubble of it. Then you can keep blowing it out. As soon as you get one, you pass it on. That's sort of the way it works, like this. But a cause to believe in. My goodness, what a cause to believe in. The life of a great master and the opportunity to serve. The Jesus and Babaji working together with Master as their instrument to bring about the salvation of the age, to find one by one, by one, by one, brothers and sisters just like me, who are there longing for the greatness that we know is our true destiny, and trapped in this little tiny world that just drives around in cars and goes to work and makes our little houses, and oh dear, oh dear. Yes, we can do all of that if behind it is this relationship with God. And so Swami was there and has been, is, and will be as Master's instrument, bringing this presence that above all, the reason I love to be with Swamiji in 1986, 87, which was fairly early on, he pulled me out of Ananda village and deposited me pretty close to where I'm standing right now, which is where I've been for the last 30 plus years of those 49 years since I came to Ananda village, because this was my destiny. So I wasn't able, as I was for the first 15 years, to walk over to Swami's house and see him every day like that. But I would go wherever he was, whenever I could, because I loved to be next to him. And the reason I like to be next to him is because standing next to him, you became more of who he is. Awake and ready and not merely able, but inspired to give. Inspired to give oneself to Master's great cause. Inspired to give oneself to all one's brothers and sisters with the message. It doesn't have to be just a tiny little life and then one more death. You know, this can be a life that really matters. And at first, of course, I had to be with Swami to understand that. But gradually I began to figure out that what happened to me when I was close to him is that I was different. And you begin to understand that what he is the best iteration of me. So that there is this extraordinary transformation is actually the only word I can think of. We walk into this incarnation in our little physical bodies, and we have this idea that there's something more. And if that longing is sincere enough, then that something more comes in front of us. If it is our role in life to meet a man like Swami Kriyananda in person, or Swami's destiny to meet Paramhansa Yogananda in person, or if it is our destiny like St. Francis to be devoted to Jesus, who had died centuries before he came, but to be so united in heart and spirit with that consciousness that Jesus just walked the woods of Assisi with him, just came and sat on the stone altar and conversed with him. Or like St. Teresa of Avila, time and space is no obstacle. There's only one obstacle. That's our lack of receptivity, our lack of commitment, our lack of willingness to really put our heart, mind, and soul behind our aspiration. And we just have to do it every single day. Every morning we wake up. This strange world that we're in right now, where days are so much alike and schedules are so much alike. You wake up in the morning and you try to think, what day is this? What's supposed to happen? Oh yes, now I remember. But every day is also really exactly the same. What day is this? What's supposed to happen? It's now. Where is my consciousness? That's the only question there is. Where is my consciousness? And then my consciousness can take my body to care for my children, to do my work, to sit in meditation, to serve, to sing, whatever it may be. But where is my consciousness? Am I walking alone, or am I walking with God? Am I in the company of these great souls who have incarnated in this world to show us who we really are? Or am I hiding back, afraid that I won't be loved, afraid that I'm not good enough, afraid to risk it? What might happen if I try? You know, this is where those early years with Swamiji, when we had so little, except we had so much, I don't even know, it had a quality to it that is what I have strived to live with ever since. In many ways, we were absolutely unafraid because we had nothing. We just had nothing. It's great having nothing because there's no point in wanting anything because you can't have it. Having a little is more difficult. But we were just there for God. We were living out in the woods. We were living with this great soul. We were in the presence of this magnetic force. And it's taken me a little while to realize that nothing has changed. You know, I allowed myself to grow up, and I allowed myself to become a worried grown-up. You know, and I would ask myself, why was I so fearless when I was in my 20s? And why am I so nervous when I'm in my 50s? Oh, because then I trusted that Swami was going to take care of everything. What's the difference now? I don't have a good answer for that one. But that's the process. There's innocence. Swami used to love this little joke where this little boy would ask this little girl, you know, a 5-year-old girl, "You a virgin?" And she would say, "Not yet." Which meaning she didn't know enough yet to know anything about it. So there's an innocence that's based on an unwillingness to take responsibility, a lack of knowledge of what this world is really like. And then there's the middle sadhana that we all have to go through, where we have to genuinely understand what God is asking of us. In the path, Swami says, very few understood the magnitude of the revolution that Master was calling us to embrace. The complete transformation of our consciousness, surrendering of every self-protective impulse that we had, in complete acceptance and openness to God. Whoa, that sounds really good until you try to do it. And then day after day after day after day, you hit your limitations, you meditate, you go to sleep, you wake up in the morning, and you try again. And that's what the spiritual path is. Just every morning, you try again. And you run through that day, and you see how close you can come. And then you meditate, you go to sleep, you wake up, and you try again. And then gradually comes the innocence of maturity. And that's what you saw in Swami. That's what we saw in Swamiji, especially, I mean, all during those middle years, he never lost faith. He never felt separated from Master. He never doubted, you know, the greatness of what the great work that Master had asked him to do, but he had to push every day against this world. But then the work was done. And so what you saw at the end of Swamiji was just, I was born for this destiny, Swami could say. Master gave me all of this to do, and now it's done. And then he could go back. Swamiji could go back to the innocence of a child, but with the maturity of a giant. And he would say, he said, when I die, he said, and I meet Master again, and Master says to me, have you loved me? Because he didn't think that Master would ask, did you get the job done? Did you write the books? Did you found the communities? Because all we have is our consciousness. Master would say, have you loved me? And Swami said he would answer with his whole heart, "You are all I have ever loved." That's what we're working for, my friends. God, Guru, Jesus, Master, Swamiji, Babaji, Divine Mother, have you loved me? And we want to be able to say, Lord, you are all I have ever loved.